Hi, and welcome to this episode of John's Motorcycle Rescue and Review. Today I'm with Yamaha's 1982 XJ1100 Maxim, and this was a follow-on to their popular XS1100 motorcycle. It was kind of the swan song for that bike. And so in the last episode, what we did was we took this bike out for a test drive, and I rode it about 100 miles, and everything seems to be running nicely and driving nicely. But as a result of the test drive, I made a decision to go ahead and get a Spiegler front brake line for the front brake here. And so I've got that ready to install. I also noticed that the front suspension was mushy. And when I would hit the brakes, there was a lot of front end dive. And so while I'm in there, I'm also I've made up spacers here. And these are about 1/2 inch spacers, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put them in the top of each of these fork legs to firm up the spring rates. So that's going to be done today as well. I've got 2 of those spacers made up, and they're just out of a PVC pipe, and it'll slide down inside the fork tube, and the cap will actually kind of compress the spring when I put these in. But these are ready to go, and that will really make the ride a lot nicer and safer under braking, especially with the improved braking performance here. And then I also measured the tread depth on my front tire and found that it is a little bit on the low side. So what I'm going to do today is, while I'm back on the front end of things, I'm going to pull the front wheel, and I'm going to take it over to a shop and get a new tire installed. And so that should really get this bike ready to go for some comparison videos with my Suzuki GS1100L, my Honda CB900 Custom, and also with my Kawasaki CSR1000. So I'm looking forward to getting this bike 100% ready to go for these. I'll do a review on this particular bike and then the comparison videos. But I'm really excited. This project is actually moving along very quickly. On the mechanical side of things, and then cosmetically, I haven't really done any detailing to the bike at all, but I will go ahead and start once it's all sorted mechanically, I'll start detailing it. I'll polish up some of these cases, make them look nicer, the side covers here, make sure that the exhaust is cleaned and looking as good as I can make it, clean the wheels, and really tidy this up. But this was this bike isn't a huge project for me. I am doing some upgrades, but this is kind of standard procedure as I buy a bike, is to just get it up to my standards and make it everyday reliable, a daily driver reliable machine. And this will probably never be a show bike, but it's going to be a nice bike. It's already a nice bike, and that's really what I'm going for here on this project. So without further ado, let's get to work. All right, first things first, we just installed the Spiegler steel braided front brake line. And this bike is a little bit unique in that the front brake lever only activates this caliper. And so we only have one brake line here that actually goes to the front lever. The other one actually goes to the other caliper on the other side here. Actually goes to the rear foot pedal. And I'm not exactly sure how to replace that whole system with the Spiegler unit. I have a concern that if I replace part of the system with the steel braided brake line, that it's going to transfer too much pressure to the part with the rubber lines. So I'm going to leave that system alone for now. But already, so before I could squeeze this all the way to the lever, and that's indicative that the rubber line was completely shot and expanding like a balloon. So with the steel braided lines here, now I can only squeeze it to here, and that is as far as this brake lever will go. So I am anticipating much improved front brake performance here. So that just feels so much better, and that's really going to up the safety on this bike. So the next thing we're going to do is we'll pull this front wheel off and get a new tire put on. While that's off, I'm actually going to drop the forks and put the two spacers in. All right, so there you have it. A relatively painless and relatively quick and easy upgrade to both the front suspension and the front brakes. And what I'm going to do next, I'm going to go for a test drive here, make sure everything functions as it should. Be sure anytime you do brake work or remove a wheel that you, before you get out on the road, you make sure you've got the pressure back into the system. What happens is when you take the calipers off, it pushes the pistons back in, and so you want to just make sure that, you know, when you do hit the brakes, you've got braking power. So those are good. The front suspension, we just added a spacer in there on top of the springs. The spring rate on these is supposedly, you know, air adjustable, but I'm not a real big fan of the air adjust suspension, and I'd rather just put a mechanical spacer in there and have a little bit more spring preload and everything. It puts less stress on your fork seals and such. So that is done. All of my bolts and everything are tightened up, and yeah, I'm gonna suit up here and go for a quick ride and make sure everything runs like it should. All right, well, I got back from the test drive the other day, and didn't quite go to plan. What I realized is that the all balls fork seals that I just put in this bike, even though they were the correct diameters for the bike and they were the ones that were recommended for the bike, they did not work. And they don't have, they're a single seal on the inside of the ones and of the all balls replacement parts. And so I actually had to go and find genuine Yamaha fork seals for this bike, and I'm going to be redoing the fork seals. It's not a job I like to do in the first place, and it just, you know, sometimes you have to do a job twice, but I did go ahead and buy the OEM ones. I was fortunate because these are no longer in production, but I found them at a local shop still in stock. So I will go ahead and put the OEM fork seals in the bike. Also, even with the spacers in the top of the fork tubes on the springs, the weight of this fairing over the years, this bike wasn't initially designed for a fairing, and so it's kind of sacked out the suspension. And you know, every time I hit the brakes, and you know, God forbid I'd have to hit them really aggressively, the bike dives significantly, and that's even after I put the spacers in. So I was not happy with that, and went ahead. And in the meantime, I ordered and I've received some progressive fork springs for this bike, and that's really going to bring the front suspension into the modern era. It'll go with the upgraded brakes, and you know, it'll just make this bike so much safer and nicer to drive. So that wraps up this episode. In the next episode on this Yamaha, I'm going to be installing the progressive fork springs. I'm also going to be installing the new fork seals for the bike. And you know, once we have this bike dialed in, we're getting close. Everything else is really functioning nicely. The bike runs, drives, shifts like it should, and you know, the new tire is working fine. It seems to handle fine, but this new suspension is new front springs and the new fork seals. It's just going to make a big difference. So I'm looking forward to that. All right, I hope you found this video entertaining and informative, and until next time, enjoy the ride.